Welcome back to another episode of Auto Mundial, the weekly car news and review show where this week we're looking back at some of our favourite new cars of 2020.
Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 has been a great year for cars. New EVs have continued to impress us, while several masterpieces from the likes of McLaren and Porsche have proved that internal combustion isn't quite done yet.
But while we've been delighted to see manufacturers pushing boundaries of what cars can do, the industry itself has struggled this year. New car registrations were down all over the world, with UK car production down by over 35%.
It hasn't been all bad news though, with several iconic cars and brands celebrating anniversaries. The Range Rover celebrated 50 years in production, while the Audi Quattro and Fiat Panda celebrated 40 years.
This year also marked the 20th anniversary of the new Mini and a remarkable 125 years of Czech brand Škoda.
Arguably one of the most important cars to hit the roads this year was Volkswagen's new electric hatchback, the ID.3. Aiming to become the Golf of EVs, the ID.3 is an incredibly important car for the brand. ID will identify all future electric cars built on this platform, with numbers 1 to 10 representing the size and body style. But while it's a shame that VW isn't continuing its long history of proper names rather than numbers, the 3 is also said to represent the brand's third era, following on from the Beetle and the Golf. Volkswagen is clearly expecting the ID.3 to sell well then, with the VW Group aiming to sell up to 3 million electric cars a year by 2025. But while the Golf and Passat have sold in their millions, thanks in part to their conservative styling and sensible image, the ID.3 is a little more out there. It's about the size of a Golf, but that is where the similarities with its petrol-powered stablemate end. With no need to fill the front end with an engine, the floor-mounted batteries have allowed designers to rethink the way a car should look, much like Jaguar has done with the I-Pace. But despite its futuristic appearance, VW hasn't gone over the top. It still looks like a pretty normal car, with no crazy exterior lighting or cameras instead of wing mirrors. And this continues inside, where you're greeted by a masterclass in understatement. It's bang up to date and suits the car, but at the same time, it looks and feels as if it could belong to just about any other car in the VW range. Thanks to the flat floor and lack of engine, there is loads of cabin space. There are cubby holes and storage bins all over the place, while the legroom in the back is more similar to that of a Phaeton than a Golf. So while the design is modern and eye-catching both inside and out, it isn't in your face. Think of the styling as a halfway house between the futuristic BMW i3 and the rather plain Nissan Leaf. The ID.3 really does have an identity all of its own. But the ID.3 has another ace up its sleeve: its range. Neither the i3 nor the Nissan Leaf will manage 200 miles on a charge, while a Volkswagen can hit up to 342, depending on which version you go for. Even the base models with the smallest batteries are capable of over 140 miles though, making this a real alternative to a conventionally powered Golf.
It's been a great year for fast cars, and one of our favourites is this, the new Porsche 718 Cayman GTS. Having previously ditched the evocative flat-six engine in favour of a turbocharged four-cylinder, we thought that the Cayman had lost its magic. Buyers clearly thought so too, leading Porsche to give us what we all wanted. Available as either the convertible Boxster or the coupe Cayman, seen here, the turboed four-cylinder is gone, and in its place sits a mildly detuned version of the engine found in the ballistic GT4. As such, the GTS puts out 395 brake horsepower, 19 less than the GT4, and revs all the way to an ear-shattering 7,800 RPM. It comes as standard with a proper 6-speed manual gearbox and can hit 0 to 62 miles per hour in just 4.5 seconds, on its way up to a top speed of 182. It's quite a lot quicker than the old GTS then, but otherwise the rest of the car remains pretty similar. There are some subtle ways of telling this new car apart from lesser Caymans though. It gets some black detailing around the rear spoiler, diffuser and intakes, while the front and rear lights are smoked, giving the car a cleaner, meaner look. It also gets some motorsport-inspired 20-inch multi-spoke alloys, housing some cross-drilled brake discs or optional carbon ceramics. It's a return to form then for the Cayman, but perhaps our favourite sports car of the year was something that isn't quite finished yet.
This is the Nissan Z Proto, a new, nearly finished prototype building on the heritage of Nissan's long line of front-engine sports cars. Think of it as an homage to some of the marque's greatest hits, with the signature long bonnet and even some 70s-style badging for good measure. And while it is still technically a prototype, it looks just about showroom ready to us. It has some sensibly sized wheels and a complete looking cabin. Nissan has also confirmed that it'll use a twin turbocharged V6 hooked up to a manual gearbox. We are already fans of the Nissan's main rival, the Toyota Supra, despite it essentially being a rebodied BMW. It will be interesting then to experience the evolution of a true Japanese sports car. But sadly, the new Nissan Z won't be coming to Europe.
Join us again after the break as we continue our look at some of 2020's best new cars. Coming up, 2020's greatest supercars, but first...
It's fair to say that this year has been full of surprises, but perhaps the biggest shock of all was the recent reveal of a new 1,000 horsepower electric Hummer. Yep, America's most ostentatious SUV is back, and it's a bit different from the old versions. For starters, it doesn't use an enormous diesel engine provisioning single-digit MPG figures. Instead, it uses 3 electric motors, 1 at the front and 2 driving the rear wheels. The result, as estimated by the manufacturer GMC, is 1,000 bhp and a frankly hilarious 11,500 pounds-feet of torque, enough to tow the factory it was built in and hit 60 miles per hour from rest in 3 seconds. It gets some proper sci-fi gadgets too, like the crab walk function and a range of driving modes, including an amusingly named Watts to Freedom setting, which unleashes maximum performance. Naturally, it's primarily designed for off-road use, and as such, it comes with some outrageous 35-inch tyres and suspension that can raise or lower the vehicle.
However, as impressive as it is, the Hummer EV isn't our favourite 4x4 of the year. That accolade goes to this, the INEOS Grenadier. And if you're thinking the styling looks familiar, you'd be right. The brainchild of a British billionaire who was dismayed by the death of the old Defender, the Grenadier sets to fill the alleged gap in the market that Land Rover has left behind. Where the new Defender is a thoroughly modern vehicle, the INEOS is somewhat more old school, with a traditional ladder frame chassis and beam axles, which should lead to some fairly old-fashioned handling reminiscent of the car it is so clearly influenced by. And while more typical SUVs may be better suited to motorway cruises than the INEOS, the Grenadier is aimed squarely at those who want a rugged vehicle to take off-road. INEOS is aiming it at those who bought old Defenders for more than their looks: farmers, mountain rescue teams, explorers, etc. Under the bonnet, the Grenadier will use a range of BMW 6-cylinder petrol and diesel engines, while it's said that the interior will be digital and up-to-date. It all sounds rather promising then for those looking to replace their old Land Rover with something more modern but in the same vein. The key to the old Defender's success, though, was its heritage and popularity, something that the INEOS Grenadier is going to have to build over time. We have to say, though, we like what we've seen so far. Rough and ready 4x4s are few and far between these days, and with its form-following function design, we think INEOS could be onto a winner.
So while 2020 may have unexpectedly been a vintage year for 4x4s, it was also a great year for supercars. And it was McLaren that really got our hearts racing with its new 765 LT. A harder, lighter, more aggressive version of the 720S, the 765 continues McLaren's LT name. LTs, or longtails, traditionally have some extra length added to the rear end to improve airflow. This time, however, the length had been added at the front with a new carbon fibre splitter. To reduce weight, the 765 is covered in amazing race-inspired details. At the back, there's a new quad-tip titanium exhaust, 40% lighter than the standard system, while the transmission, which you can see if you peer through the rear bumper, has also been on a diet. For even more weight saving, the windows are made from thinner glass, while the new 10-spoke alloy wheels, fitted with titanium wheel nuts and specially developed Pirelli tyres, save another 22 kilos. All the body panels are now carbon fibre, saving another 14 kilograms. The result of this fasting is an 80 kilo saving over the standard car, bringing the total curb weight to a smidge over 1.3 tonnes. But the 765 hasn't just been dieting. It has more muscle too. The twin-turbo 4-litre V8 has been pumped up to 755 brake horsepower with 590 foot-pounds of torque. The 0 to 62 miles per hour remains unchanged, but it can now hit 124 in just 7.2 seconds. To help keep this immense power down, the LT has received some heavily reworked aero components. There's the aforementioned front splitter, redesigned front bumper, a new front floor, more aggressive side skirts, a new rear diffuser, and a bigger active rear wing, all combining to create 25% more downforce over the regular 720. The chassis has also been tweaked, with a wider track and stiffer suspension to deliver optimum feedback through your posterior. The ride height has been dropped ever so slightly with specially calibrated springs and dampers. Lastly, the 765 has also received a brake upgrade, with carbon ceramic discs taken from the Senna hypercar, which can get it from 124 miles per hour to rest in just 110 metres, rearranging your internal organs in the process. Unlike the standard 720S, this is a limited production car with 765 being built. Of course, all that performance and indeed exclusivity doesn't come cheap. But for those who want the ultimate track day supercar, there's not much else that comes close.
Speaking of limited production cars, 2020 has also seen a number of wild creations for well-heeled enthusiasts. Back in March, we were treated to this, the Alfa Romeo Giulia GTA, an unhinged track day weapon based on one of our favourite performance saloons. It's essentially a Giulia quadrifoglio that's hit the gym with more power, less weight, and all sorts of wonderful track-focused details. It gets some massive swollen arches, aggressive side skirts, and an all-new Akrapovic aluminium exhaust poking out of the immense rear diffuser. In fact, it's covered in new aero bits to improve downforce, said to be co-developed with Alfa Romeo Formula One partner Sauber Engineering. There are two versions available, the GTA and the even more hardcore GT-AM, a more stripped-out version with a bigger wing half cage where the rear seat should be and some bucket seats and harnesses. The 100-kilogram weight saving has been achieved with a lot of carbon fibre. It has carbon drive shafts, carbon body panels, carbon wheel arches and a carbon roof. Further weight loss has also been gained with some more aluminium bits in the engine and the chassis too. Power has been boosted to 533 brake horsepower, meaning this rear-wheel drive four-door compact saloon car can now hit 62 miles per hour from rest in 3.6 seconds. The suspension has been tweaked to help keep it facing roughly the right way with new springs and shock absorbers.
Another super limited edition car that left our mouths agape was the gorgeous Aston Martin V12 Speedster. A bit of a parts bin special perhaps, this roofless Aston follows on from the McLaren ALFA, Ferrari SP1 Monza and Bentley Bacalar, all following the same proven formula of chopping off the roof of an existing car and garnishing it with fancy bodywork and an expensive interior. You could argue that all these cars are a cynical way to charge a lot of money for a slightly modified production car, and you'd probably be right, but that doesn't stop us wanting this Aston more than our next breath. Despite its vantage proportions, under the bonnets it's the same 5.2-litre V12 you'll find in a DB11 or DBS, meaning this pint-sized speedster gets an almighty 690 brake horsepower. It isn't for the faint of heart then, but for those really wishing to frighten themselves, look no further than this, the ZINGER 21C.
The perfect antidote to the flurry of crossovers and souped-up SUVs we've seen this year, the ZINGER is a 1200 horsepower hypercar that can hit 62 miles per hour from rest in under 2 seconds. What's more, ZINGER claims that the 21C will go from 0 to 248 miles per hour and back to 0 again in 29 seconds. The numbers are truly mind-boggling. The top speed is 268, while the 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio means it's light too, so it should be as impressive around corners as it is in a straight line. Built and engineered in the USA, the 21C is constructed using state-of-the-art 3D printing with an alloy and carbon fibre chassis. There are different versions available set up for track or road use, with track models getting some aggressive aero and a big wing. But perhaps the most interesting detail is the seating configuration. The passenger sits behind the driver in tandem, meaning the ZINGER is narrow with a McLaren F1-style central driving position.
But if it's a McLaren F1 driving experience you want, why not get a car from the same designer? It seems that the days of naturally aspirated V12s and heel and toe downshifts are no more, replaced instead by compact turbocharged engines and paddle shift gearboxes, meaning many modern supercars have become tame and as easy to drive as a family saloon. However, Gordon Murray, designer of the F1, has decided that there is still room for the old way of doing things. This is his latest creation, the GMA T50, the spiritual successor to the 240 miles per hour McLaren. Aiming to rewrite the supercar rulebook, the T50 harks back to the good old days with 3 pedals and a 690 horsepower atmospheric V12 behind the cockpit. But while that may seem like an old-fashioned recipe, it's been crafted in a thoroughly modern way. The Cosworth-developed V12 is the highest revving road car engine ever made, screaming all the way up to 12,100 RPM. Its pure design isn't festooned with spoilers and canards either, instead using a fan inspired by the Murray-designed Brabham BT46B Formula 1 car to produce 15 kilograms of downforce. And while the big headlights and roof scoop are reminiscent of the old F1, the biggest similarity is the three-person seating configuration, with the driver's seat in the middle. Just 100 T50s will be built, each costing £2.36 million before taxes. It's a hefty price tag, but when you consider the going rate for a McLaren F1 is now upwards of 20 million, we'd say it's a bit of a bargain.
Despite the global pandemic then, 2020 has been a great year for new cars. With the industry slowly starting to recover, it's amazing to see the continued development of both electric and internal combustion power.
Join us again next week as we take a look at some of the most exciting new cars to look forward to in 2021.